The colony known as Epsilon 7 hung in the shadow of a dying star, its skies painted in hues of red and orange. The air was thick with tension, a feeling that had settled over the humans stationed there like an invisible fog. For months, Captain Ryan Dawson had tried to keep the peace between Earth's military forces and the alien species called the Veil. But every attempt at negotiation seemed to unravel faster than the last. The Veil were enigmatic beings, tall, slender creatures with translucent skin that shimmered faintly under light. Their voices sounded more like vibrations than words, and their intentions remained shrouded in mystery. Amelia Hayes sat at her desk in the communications hub, staring at the screen filled with fragmented phrases of the Veil language. She was one of the few linguists on the colony tasked with deciphering their complex speech patterns. Her frustration grew with each passing day. No matter how hard she worked, the gap between the two species felt insurmountable. It wasn't just about language, it was about trust, or rather the lack of it. Every time negotiations broke down, the same phrase echoed through the room. "We're done talking." Those 4 simple words carried a weight far heavier than anyone cared to admit. Each time they were spoken, something inside Amelia sank deeper into despair. Outside the communications hub, Private Daniel Cruz stood guard near the perimeter fence. He adjusted his helmet as he scanned the horizon, where the barren landscape stretched endlessly. His rifle hung loosely in his grip, but his eyes darted nervously. Daniel had been part of several skirmishes along the border zones, small conflicts that erupted when misunderstandings spiraled out of control. What troubled him most wasn't the fighting itself, it was what happened afterward. The Veil didn't retreat like other enemies. They simply disappeared, vanishing into thin air without leaving a trace. It was unnatural, unsettling, and it left him uneasy. Back inside the command center, Captain Dawson leaned over a table covered with maps and holographic projections. Lieutenant Grace Bennett stood beside him, arms crossed, as she listened to his briefing. "We can't afford another failure," Dawson said, his voice firm but tinged with exhaustion. "If we don't find a way to make them understand, this entire colony could be lost." Grace nodded silently, her expression unreadable. She had seen too many failed missions already, and though she rarely showed emotion, the strain was evident in the tightness around her eyes. Later that evening, Amelia met with Zilra, one of the Veil ambassadors, in a neutral meeting room. The Limbi walls were bare except for a single circular table where the two sat facing each other. Zilra's form shimmered faintly in the dim light, and Amelia couldn't help but feel intimidated despite her training. "We need to clarify your demands," Amelia began cautiously. "If we're going to avoid further conflict, we have to know exactly what you want." Zilra tilted their head slightly, a gesture Amelia had come to recognize as curiosity or confusion. "Your kind struggles to listen," Zilra replied, their voice resonating softly. "Not just to us, but to yourselves. You speak of peace, yet prepare for war. This contradiction, it confuses us." Amelia sighed, rubbing her temples. She wanted to argue, to explain that humans weren't so different from the Veil, but she knew it wouldn't change anything. Instead, she changed the subject. "Can you tell me why your people vanish after battles? Where do you go?" Zilra hesitated before responding. "There are places beyond your understanding, places where silence reigns." Before Amelia could press further, the lights flickered briefly, and a low rumble shook the building. Both looked toward the door as alarms blared outside. Daniel rushed back to his post, heart pounding as chaos erupted across the colony. Explosions lit up the night sky, sending plumes of smoke billowing into the atmosphere. The Veil had launched a surprise attack on the outer defenses, catching everyone off guard. Soldiers scrambled to respond, but the invaders moved with precision, targeting key structures before retreating just as quickly as they had arrived. When the dust settled, an eerie quiet fell over the colony, the kind of silence that pressed against eardrums, heavy and suffocating. Captain Dawson surveyed the damage, his jaw clenched tightly. Buildings lay in ruins, fires smoldered in the distance, and the wounded groaned in pain. But worse than the destruction was the feeling of helplessness that gripped everyone present. Amelia found herself standing amidst the wreckage, staring at the horizon where the veil had vanished. She replayed Zilra's words in her mind. Places where silence reigns. Was this what they meant? A silence that followed violence, a void left behind when communication failed completely? She shuddered at the thought. That night, Dawson called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. Amelia attended reluctantly, still shaken by the events of the day. As they discussed strategies for retaliation, she raised her hand hesitantly. Maybe we should focus on understanding them better instead of preparing for war, she suggested. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Some looked skeptical, others annoyed, but Dawson simply nodded thoughtfully. It's worth considering, he said finally. But if we wait too long, they might decide we're not worth the effort. Grace spoke up next. They've given us no reason to trust them. How do we even know they're interested in peace? Amelia opened her mouth to reply, but stopped. Herself. Deep down, she wasn't sure anymore. All she knew was that continuing down this path would only lead to more bloodshed and more silence. As the meeting adjourned, Daniel approached Amelia outside the command center. You really think we can talk our way out of this? He asked, his tone skeptical. I don't know, she admitted. But I do know that if we keep choosing war over dialogue, we'll lose more than just buildings and lives. We'll lose any chance of breaking the cycle. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the horizon, where the stars twinkled faintly against the darkened sky. Somewhere out there, the veil waited. And though neither of them voiced it aloud, both wondered whether humanity was ready to face what came next, or if the silence would consume them all. The decision was made quickly, almost too quickly for some. Captain Ryan Dawson ordered his fleet to pursue the Veil ships into uncharted space. The attack on the colony's outer defenses had left everyone shaken, but it also fueled a determination to find answers. Lieutenant Grace Bennett stood beside Dawson as he gave the command, her expression calm but her mind racing. She had seen enough battles to know that chasing an enemy into unknown territory was risky. But something about this mission felt different. Maybe it was the way the Veil had vanished without a trace after the assault, leaving behind only destruction and silence. Or maybe it was the look in Amelia Hayes's eyes, a mix of fear and hope that seemed to drive them all forward. The journey took them far beyond the safety of the colony, deep into a region of space marked by swirling clouds of cosmic dust and scattered debris. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon something unexpected, a massive structure floating silently amidst the wreckage. The object was ancient, its surface scarred by time and wear. Its shape was irregular, with jagged edges and smooth panels that reflected faint light from distant stars. Dawson ordered the fleet to hold position while a smaller team, led by himself and Grace, approached the structure in a shuttle. Amelia joined the team, unable to resist the opportunity to explore what might be a relic of another civilization. Private Daniel Cruz and Marcus Lee, two soldiers from the ground crew, accompanied them as well. As the shuttle docked with the structure, an uneasy feeling settled over the group. The air inside was cold and stale, carrying a metallic tang that made Amelia's skin crawl. Lights flickered weakly along the walls, casting long shadows that danced eerily in the dim glow. The interior of the structure was vast, filled with corridors that twisted and turned like a labyrinth. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly with a bioluminescent light. Amelia immediately recognized them as similar to the markings she had seen in Veil transmissions. Her heart raced as she ran her fingers over the symbols, trying to piece together their meaning. This place, it's a message, she murmured, half to herself. It's trying to tell us something. Grace kept close to Dawson, her hand resting on the hilt of her weapon. We should be careful, she warned. We don't know what kind of traps might be here. Her words proved prophetic when Daniel and Marcus accidentally triggered a hidden mechanism. The floor beneath them shifted, causing the group to stumble. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Amelia covered her ears, wincing at the intensity of the sound, but it wasn't just noise. It was a vibration that seemed to seep into their bones. One by one, the others collapsed, clutching their heads in pain. Only Amelia remained standing, though barely. The vibrations didn't affect her the same way. Instead, they opened a floodgate in her mind. Images flashed before her eyes, visions of war, destruction, and extinction. She saw civilizations rising and falling, consumed by their own greed and mistrust. She saw the Veil, not as aggressors but as survivors, desperately trying to prevent the same fate from befalling humanity. The weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to stay focused. When the humming finally stopped, the others began to stir, groaning as they regained consciousness. Daniel sat up slowly, his face pale. What was that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Amelia knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she helped him to his feet. "I think it was a warning," she said softly. "A record of what happened here. This place wasn't built for war. It was meant to stop it." Marcus glared at her, suspicion etched into his features. "You're saying the Veil brought us here? That this is some kind of trick?" He gestured angrily at the walls around them. "How do we know this isn't just another trap?" Dawson stepped in before the argument could escalate. "Enough," he said firmly. "We need to focus on figuring out why this place exists. If Amelia's right, and I'm inclined to believe her, then this could be our best chance to understand the Veil." As they ventured deeper into the structure, they discovered more clues about its purpose. In one chamber, they found a series of murals depicting various species working together. The images showed beings of all shapes and sizes collaborating, sharing knowledge and resources. But the final mural was darker, showing those same species turning against each other, their unity shattered by conflict. Amelia studied the artwork intently, piecing together fragments of text written in a language that seemed to blend elements of both human and Veil communication. "It's a cycle," she explained to the group. "These people, they tried to create a system to prevent war, but something went wrong. They couldn't escape their own nature." Her voice grew quieter as she added, "And now the Veil are afraid we'll repeat their mistakes." Grace frowned, crossing her arms. "So what are you saying? That the Veil attacked us because they think we're doomed to destroy ourselves?" "Not exactly," Amelia replied. "I think they see us as a threat, but not because we're evil. Because we're unpredictable. They've been through this before, and they don't want to lose another chance at breaking the cycle." The conversation was interrupted when Daniel called out from a nearby corridor. He had found what appeared to be a recording device embedded in the wall. It looked ancient, its surface cracked and worn, but it still emitted a faint pulse of energy. Against Amelia's protests, Marcus insisted on activating it. "If this thing has answers, we need to hear them," he snapped. Reluctantly, Amelia agreed, and together they triggered the device. At first, nothing happened. Then, a holographic projection flickered to life, displaying scenes of devastation and despair. Voices echoed through the chamber, speaking in languages none of them understood. But the emotions behind the words were clear: pain, regret, hopelessness. The message ended abruptly, leaving the group in stunned silence. Dawson broke the quiet first. "This changes everything," he said, his tone heavy with realization. "The Veil aren't just fighting us, they're fighting history itself, and if we don't prove we're different, they'll do whatever it takes to stop us." Amelia nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. There was still so much to learn, but one thing was certain. The eerie silence that followed every failed negotiation wasn't just emptiness. It was a plea for understanding, for cooperation, for survival. As the group prepared to leave the lay structure, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Whatever the Veil planned next, it would come soon. And whether humanity was ready or not, the choice between war and peace rested squarely on their shoulders. Back aboard the ship, tension simmered like a pot about to boil over. Captain Ryan Dawson paced the narrow confines of the command center, his boots clicking against the metal floor. The discovery of the ancient structure had raised more questions than answers. and now the weight of those unanswered questions pressed down on him. He glanced at Lieutenant Grace Bennett, who stood quietly by the viewport, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her usual calm demeanor was beginning to crack, tiny fissures showing in her steely resolve. Amelia Hayes sat at a workstation nearby, poring over the data they had collected from the ruins. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard as she cross-referenced symbols and translated fragments of text. Despite her exhaustion, she couldn't stop. Every moment felt crucial, every detail a potential key to understanding the Veil. But not everyone shared her urgency. Private Daniel Cruz leaned against a wall, his rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. His face was drawn, shadows under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. Marcus Lee, on the other hand, was restless, pacing back and forth as he muttered under his breath. "This is madness," Marcus finally snapped, breaking the uneasy silence. "We're wasting time chasing ghosts while the Veil are out there planning their next move. They've already attacked us once. What makes you think they won't do it again?" Dawson turned to face him, his expression hard but controlled. "Because we don't have a choice," he said firmly. "If Amelia's right, and I believe she is, then this isn't just about us versus them. It's bigger than that. We need to figure out how to break this cycle before it destroys us all." Marcus scoffed, shaking his head. "And what if she's wrong? What if this whole thing is just another trick?" Grace stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Then we'll deal with it when it happens. But sitting here doing nothing isn't an option either." The argument might have escalated further if Amelia hadn't interrupted. She stood abruptly, holding up a sheet of translated text. "I think I've found something important," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Everyone turned to look at her, even Marcus, though his scowl remained firmly in place. "What is it?" Dawson asked, stepping closer. Amelia hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "It's a warning beacon," she explained. "This entire structure was designed to send a message, a universal plea for cooperation. But it also describes what happens when civilizations fail to listen. They turn on each other, destroy themselves, and vanish forever." She paused, glancing at the others. "The Veil aren't trying to conquer us. They're trying to save us from ourselves." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel broke the quiet, his voice hesitant. "So, what do we do now?" Dawson exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. "We reach out to them," he said finally. "We propose a joint expedition to explore the ruins further. If we can uncover more evidence of this cycle, maybe we can prove to the Veil that we're willing to change." Grace raised an eyebrow. "You really think they'll agree to work with us after everything that's happened?" "It's a risk," Dawson admitted, "but it's one we have to take." Contacting the Veil wasn't easy. Their communication methods were still largely a mystery, relying on frequencies and vibrations beyond human perception. Amelia spent hours refining her translations, crafting a message that conveyed both humility and determination. When the response finally came, it was brief but clear. 2 representatives would join the humans on their return to the ruins. Theer. Veil arrived in a sleek, organic-looking vessel that seemed to pulse with life. Kyle and Nira emerged from the craft, their forms shimmering faintly in the light. Both were taller than most humans, their translucent skin catching the glow of the stars. Kyle's movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, while Nira's presence radiated a quiet curiosity. Dawson greeted them cautiously, extending a hand in what he hoped was a gesture of goodwill. Kale tilted their head slightly, studying the offered hand before mimicking the motion. It was a small step, but it felt significant. As the combined team prepared to re-enter the ruins, an uneasy alliance began to form. Grace found herself paired with Kale during the journey, their paths crossing frequently as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors. At first, their interactions were stiff and formal, but over time, a mutual respect started to grow. Grace admired Kale's precision and focus, qualities she recognized in herself. For their part, Kale seemed intrigued by Grace's adaptability, her ability to remain calm under pressure. Meanwhile, Amelia worked closely with Nira, exchanging knowledge and insights about the ruins. Nira's understanding of the ancient symbols was far deeper than Amelia had anticipated, revealing layers of meaning she hadn't noticed before. Together, they pieced together fragments of the story, uncovering details about the civilizations that had once used the structure as a meeting place. It became clear that these beings had valued dialogue above all else, seeing it as the foundation of peace. But somewhere along the way, their unity had fractured, leading to their downfall. Not everyone embraced the collaboration so readily. Marcus remained openly distrustful, watching the Veil with narrowed eyes. He questioned their motives at every turn, accusing them of using the mission to gather intelligence for future attacks. His paranoia reached a boiling point when equipment malfunctions began occurring during critical moments. A sensor array failed mid-scan, forcing the team to backtrack. A power surge caused temporary blackouts, plunging sections of the ruins into darkness. Each incident fueled Marcus's suspicions, and he voiced his concerns loudly and often. Amelia tried to reassure him, pointing out that the structure was old and unstable. "These things happen," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. Deep down, she couldn't entirely dismiss his fears. The Veil were enigmatic, their intentions difficult to read. Even Kyle and Nira, who had shown no signs of hostility, carried an air of mystery that made her uneasy. Despite the challenges, progress was made. The team discovered a hidden chamber deep within the ruins, its entrance concealed behind a panel of glowing symbols. Inside, they found a massive crystalline artifact suspended in midair, pulsating with a soft, rhythmic light. Amelia approached it cautiously, her heart pounding. "This must be the core of the structure," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's the source of the signal." Kale and Nira exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. "It is sacred," Kale said finally, their voice resonating softly. "A gift and a warning." Grace frowned, stepping closer. "What kind of warning?" Nira gestured toward the artifact. "It holds the truth of the cycle. To activate it is to accept responsibility for unity or destruction." The weight of those words hung heavily in the air. Dawson stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the artifact. "Then we need to activate it," he said firmly. "Whatever it shows us, we have to see it." Amelia nodded, though her hands trembled as she reached for the control panel embedded in the wall. As she entered the final sequence, the room grew brighter, the artifact's glow intensifying. The hum of energy filled the chamber, vibrating through the floor and walls. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. And then, the vision began. The vision unfolded like a storm breaking over calm waters. The crystalline artifact pulsed with an intense light, filling the chamber with colors that shifted and danced across the walls. Images appeared in the air, holographic projections so vivid they felt almost real. The team stood frozen, their eyes wide as scenes of distant worlds and ancient civilizations played out before them. At first, the visions were peaceful. They showed beings of all shapes and sizes coming together, working side by side, sharing knowledge, building structures that reached toward the stars. Amelia watched in awe as she recognized patterns in their interactions, echoes of cooperation and unity. But then the tone shifted. The images grew darker, showing those same civilizations turning on each other. Wars erupted, cities burned, and entire species vanished into nothingness. The cycle repeated itself again and again, a tragic loop of creation and destruction. Kyle and Nira stood silently, their forms shimmering faintly in the shifting light. Their expressions were unreadable, but there was a heaviness to their presence, as if they carried the weight of these visions in their very essence. Captain Ryan Dawson clenched his fists at his sides, his jaw tight as he absorbed the message. This was what the Veil had been trying to warn them about, a fate humanity seemed perilously close to repeating. Grace Bennett moved closer to the artifact, her sharp eyes scanning the projections. "It's not just history," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the hum of energy. "It's a prediction," Amelia nodded, her heart pounding. They're showing us what happens when trust breaks down, when fear takes over. She turned to Dawson, her face pale but resolute. We have to prove we're different, that we can break the cycle. Before anyone could respond, Marcus Lee stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. This is nonsense, he spat, gesturing wildly at the artifact. How do we even know this isn't some kind of trick? Maybe they're trying to brainwash us. Enough, Dawson snapped, his voice sharp enough to silence Marcus. We don't have time for your paranoia. If you can't focus on the mission, then stay out of the way. Marcus glared at him but didn't argue further. Instead, he retreated to the edge of the chamber, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. His distrust hung in the air like a shadow, casting doubt over the fragile alliance. As the visions continued, the team began to notice something unusual. The artifact wasn't just showing them the past. It was responding to their presence. Subtle changes rippled through the projections, as if the structure itself was learning from them. Amelia realized it was testing their reactions, gauging whether they truly understood the lesson it was trying to teach. She glanced at Kale and Nira, who seemed equally attuned to the shifts in the display. There was no denying it now. The ruins weren't just a relic. They were alive in some way, a sentient archive designed to guide those who entered. When the final image faded, leaving the chamber bathed in soft, steady light, an eerie silence settled over the group. It was the same silence Amelia had felt after the attack on the colony, the kind that pressed against eardrums and weighed on souls. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. Dawson broke the quiet first. What now? He asked, his voice low but steady. How do we prove we're ready to change? Nira stepped forward, their form glowing faintly. The artifact requires action, they said, their voice resonating softly. It must be activated by both humans and Veil together. Only then will it broadcast the signal. What signal? Daniel Cruz asked, his voice hesitant. A message of unity, Kel replied, a declaration to the galaxy that two species have chosen peace over conflict. The implications sank in slowly. Activating the artifact would mean committing fully to the alliance, not just in words but in deeds. It would mean trusting the Veil completely, despite everything that had happened between them. For some, like Amelia and Grace, the decision felt clear. For others, like Marcus, it was unthinkable. We don't have a choice, Dawson said finally, his tone leaving no room for argument. If this is our chance to break the cycle, we take it. The process of activating the artifact was more complex than anyone anticipated. It required precise coordination between the humans and the Veil, each group contributing unique elements to the sequence. Amelia worked closely with Nira, deciphering the final instructions etched into the walls. Grace partnered with Kale, ensuring the structural integrity of the chamber remained stable as energy levels surged. Meanwhile, Daniel and Marcus assisted where they could, though Marcus's reluctance was palpable. Tensions ran high as the activation neared completion. Equipment groaned under the strain, and the hum of energy grew louder, vibrating through every surface. Just as the final step approached, disaster struck. A critical component malfunctioned, causing a cascade of failures throughout the system. Lights flickered and alarms blared, threatening to derail the entire process. Marcus shouted over the noise, pointing accusingly at Kale and Nira. I knew this was a trap. They've sabotaged us. No, Amelia countered, her voice firm despite the chaos. It's the structure. It's unstable. We need to fix it, not fight each other. With no time to waste, Grace sprang into action, working alongside Daniel, to stabilize the failing systems. Amelia and Nira focused on rerouting power to the artifact, their movements synchronized despite their differences. Even Kale joined the effort, using their advanced tools to repair damaged circuits. Slowly, The chamber was a blur of motion as the team worked frantically to stabilize the artifact. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the hum of energy grew deafening, shaking the very walls around them. Amelia's hands trembled as she adjusted the controls, sweat dripping down her face. Beside her, Nira moved with calm precision, their translucent fingers gliding over the ancient mechanism. The Veil ambassador didn't speak, but their actions spoke volumes. They were fully committed to making this work. Grace and Daniel wrestled, with a section of the floor panel that had buckled under the strain. "Hold it steady," Grace barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. Daniel braced himself against the metal, his muscles straining as he fought to keep the panel in place. Nearby, Cale used a device that emitted a soft blue glow, repairing damaged wires and rerouting power flows. Their movements were methodical, almost hypnotic, as if they had done this countless times before. Marcus stood apart from the group, his weapon drawn, his eyes darting between the humans and the Veil. His suspicion hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. "This is madness," he muttered under his breath. "We're trusting them too much." Captain Ryan Dawson ignored him, focusing instead on coordinating the efforts. "Amelia, how's it looking?" he called out, his voice strained but steady. "Almost. There," she replied, her voice tight with concentration. "Just need a few more seconds." The artifact pulsed erratically, its light flickering like a dying star. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire structure might collapse under the strain, but then, with one final surge of energy, the system stabilized. The hum softened, becoming a gentle vibration that resonated through the chamber. The light steadied, bathing everyone in a warm golden glow. "It's ready," Nira said softly, turning to face the group. Their expression was unreadable, but there was a sense of gravity in their tone. "Now comes the hardest part." Dawson nodded, stepping forward. "What do we need to do?" Cale gestured toward the artifact. "Both species must activate it together. One hand from each side, a human and a Veil, must touch the core simultaneously." The room fell silent as the weight of the moment settled over them. This was it. The culmination of everything they had worked for. If they succeeded, they would send a message of unity to the galaxy. If they failed, no one dared to think about what might happen next. Amelia stepped up first, her heart pounding. She glanced at Nira, who nodded encouragingly. Together they approached the artifact, their movements slow and deliberate. Dawson followed, placing a reassuring hand on Amelia's shoulder. "You've got this," he said quietly. On the other side, Cale extended their shimmering hand toward the core. Amelia hesitated for only a moment before reaching out as well. Her fingers brushed against the smooth surface of the artifact, cool and unyielding beneath her touch. Across from her, Cale's hand hovered just above the core, trembling slightly. "Do it," Dawson urged, his voice firm but gentle. With a deep breath, Amelia pressed her palm flat against the artifact. At the same moment, Cale did the same. A surge of energy rippled outward, engulfing the chamber in a brilliant flash of light. The vibration intensified, resonating not just in their ears but in their very bones. For a brief instant, Amelia felt connected to Cale, to the Veil, to everyone and everything around her. It was overwhelming, beautiful and terrifying all at once. When the light faded, the silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't empty or oppressive. It was peaceful, a quiet acknowledgement of what had been achieved. The artifact pulsed gently, its glow steady and unwavering. "Well?" Marcus demanded, breaking the stillness. "Did it work?" Nira turned to face the group, their expression softer now. "It has begun," they said simply. "The signal will spread across the galaxy, carrying our message of unity." Grace exhaled slowly, lowering her weapon. "And the Veil? What happens now?" Cale tilted their heads slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human. "We wait, and we hope you prove yourselves worthy of trust." Dawson nodded, his expression solemn. "Then consider this the start of a new chapter, for all of us." Back aboard the ship, the mood was subdued but hopeful. The journey home felt lighter somehow, as if a great burden had been lifted. Amelia sat alone in her quarters, staring out at the stars streaking past the viewport. Her mind replayed the events of the day, lingering on the moment when she and Kale had touched the artifact together. She couldn't explain it, but she felt changed, as if something fundamental within her had shifted. In the command center, Dawson reviewed the data collected during the mission. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust took time to build, especially after so much conflict. But for the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of optimism. Maybe, just maybe, humanity could break free from the cycle. Grace joined him, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. "Do you think it'll stick?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. "This alliance?" "I don't know," Dawson admitted. "But I do know one thing. We can't go back to the way things were. Not after what we've seen." Down in the crew quarters, Daniel sat with Marcus, attempting to bridge the gap between them. "You don't have to agree with everything," he said cautiously, "but at least give them a chance." Marcus scowled but didn't argue. Perhaps he too was beginning to see the cracks in his own beliefs. As the ship drifted further from the ruins, the eerie silence that had haunted them for so long began to fade. In its place was a faint murmur, a whisper of hope carried on the winds of change. Humanity in the Veil had taken the first step toward coexistence, fragile though it might be. And while the future remained uncertain, one truth was clear. The weight of words mattered more than ever. Silence wasn't an end, it was a beginning,